They walk among us, silent, unnoticed, and often admired. In the office, they're the ones who command attention with effortless charisma. At dinner parties, they're the magnetic storytellers, drawing laughter and nods of approval. They make eye contact just long enough to seem sincere, tilt their head at just the right moment to appear empathetic, and speak with a calmness that puts others at ease. But what you see is a mask, a carefully crafted illusion, polished and worn with precision. Behind that flawless facade isn't a friend, a lover, or a leader. It's a predator. A sociopath doesn't experience the world the way most people do. They don't form bonds, they simulate them. They don't feel guilt, they weaponize your conscience against you. Every smile, every compliment, every touch of concern, they are tools in a psychological toolbox, used to gain trust, to disarm, to dominate. Their charm is not a personality trait, it's bait. They can mimic kindness without ever feeling it. They can console you without caring. And when they finally take what they want, your money, your safety, your life, they walk away with the same calm they greeted you with. No remorse, no fear, no reflection. Just the next opportunity. Another face to deceive. Another mask to wear. What makes them terrifying isn't just what they do, but how easily they do it. How normal they seem. How late it is, by the time you realize what you're dealing with. So buckle in. You're not just about to hear another true crime story. You're about to step into a world where humanity is a costume and manipulation is the only language spoken. Welcome to the chilling world inside the mind of a sociopath. They walk among us. Ordinary, unassuming, sometimes even magnetic. You've passed them on the street, shared polite conversation at work, maybe even trusted one with your secrets. They blend in almost too well. They smile at just the right moment, laugh on cue, mirror your emotions with uncanny precision. They say all the right things, not because they feel them, but because they know that's what you want to hear. It's not connection. It's mimicry. A performance, perfectly executed. But peel back the charm, and the mask slips. Beneath lies something far more unsettling. A predator, precise, emotionless, and cold as steel. Not driven by rage or desperation, but by calculation. There's no remorse in their eyes. No fear. No guilt. Just a void chilling in its stillness. Because the sociopath does not feel like you or I do. Not love. Not sorrow. Not shame. And that's the most terrifying part. You wouldn't know you were standing next to one. Not until it's already too late. Welcome to the hidden world inside the mind of a sociopath, where empathy is a foreign language and manipulation is fluent, where morality is a myth and murder, sometimes just another move in a twisted game. So what makes a sociopath cross the line? What turns disconnection into destruction? Today, we explore the question that haunts psychologists, detectives, and survivors alike. What makes a sociopath kill? These are real cases, real victims, and real psychology. Let's dive in. You're tuned in to The Crime Keeper, the place where cold cases, forensic facts, and criminal minds collide. Here, we don't just tell crime stories. We dissect them. We pull apart the psychology behind the horror. We ask the hard questions, not just about what happened, but why. And today, we're stepping into the most unnerving territory of all, the world of sociopathic killers. Not crimes of passion, not impulsive rage, but acts of brutality that are planned, calculated, and devoid of human empathy. These aren't the kinds of killers who snap. They don't lose control. In fact, control is exactly what they crave. Which begs the question, why do some sociopaths live relatively normal lives, high-functioning, successful, even charming, while others spiral into manipulation, cruelty, and eventually, murder? Is there a line that gets crossed? A moment, a trigger, a choice? Or are they simply waiting for the right time, the perfect opportunity, to strike? In this episode, we unravel real-life case studies where sociopathy met bloodshed. We'll examine the red flags, the signs that were missed. We'll decode the patterns, the psychological tells hiding in plain sight. And we'll confront the chilling reality. Some of the most dangerous individuals on Earth might be the ones who seem the most normal. This isn't just true crime. This is criminal psychology in its rawest, most revealing form. Let's begin. First things first, what exactly is a sociopath? It's a term we hear often in pop culture, crime shows, and headlines. But clinically, sociopathy isn't a diagnosis on its own. It falls under the umbrella of Antisocial Personality Disorder, or ASPD. A deeply rooted psychological condition recognized by the DSM-5, the standard manual for mental health professionals. At the core of ASPD is a chilling pattern of behavior, one that ignores, defies, and often mocks the norms that hold society together. Sociopaths typically exhibit 4 key traits. A profound lack of empathy. They don't just fail to understand others' pain, they often can't feel it at all. Manipulativeness. Relationships aren't about connection, they're about control. Impulsivity. Reckless decisions. No concern for consequences. A constant hunger for stimulation. A blatant disregard for rules, laws, or morality, not because they didn't learn right from wrong, but because those boundaries simply don't matter to them. But here's where things get complicated and far more unsettling. Not every sociopath is violent. Not every sociopath is a killer. In fact, many live seemingly ordinary lives. They climb corporate ladders. They win elections. They host dinner parties and volunteer in their communities. They're often charismatic, intelligent, sometimes even well-loved. They know how to act. They know how to act like a person with empathy, and they do it so convincingly that most never suspect a thing. So then what happens? What causes one sociopath to stop at manipulation, while another takes a life? What pushes them from psychological coldness to calculated violence? Is it opportunity? Is it environment? Or is the desire to kill always there waiting in the shadows, quiet, until it no longer can be ignored? That's the line we'll walk today. And by the end, we may be a little closer to answering the question. What tips a sociopath over the edge, into murder? Paul Bernardo was, by all appearances, the kind of man people admired. Clean-cut, polite, well-spoken. He wore the smile of someone who had everything under control, a model citizen in the eyes of many. But that smile was a mask. Behind closed doors, Bernardo was something else entirely. A predator, a sadist, and one of the most disturbing examples of sociopathy in modern criminal history. Alongside his partner and then-wife Karla Homolka, he became known as one half of the infamous Ken and Barbie killers. A nickname that, in its eerie contrast, only adds to the horror. Because together, they committed unspeakable acts, raping, torturing, and murdering multiple young women, including Karla's own sister, Tammy Homolka, who was just a teenager at the time. Bernardo didn't kill in a fit of passion. His sociopathy wasn't chaotic or impulsive. It was cold. It was strategic. And it was chillingly methodical. He filmed his victims not just to relive the moments, but to savor the power he held. To dominate every second of their suffering. And even when arrested, sitting across from investigators, facing the full weight of justice. He smiled. He joked. He showed no shame. No guilt. Only the kind of smug detachment that made seasoned detectives shudder. Psychologically, Paul Bernardo fit the profile of a malignant sociopath. A blend of narcissism, sadism, and antisocial personality disorder, marked by grandiosity, manipulation, and a stunning lack of empathy. But perhaps the most disturbing truth. To his neighbors, he was just Paul. A charming, well-dressed young man. A guy who helped carry groceries, made polite conversation, and never raised suspicion. That duality, the ability to live 2 lives, seamlessly, is what makes sociopathic killers so uniquely terrifying. They don't just deceive the world. They perform for it. And we, unknowingly, applaud the act. Because sociopaths don't wear the face of evil. They wear the face we trust the most. Then there's Aileen Wuornos, a name etched into true crime history not just for the lives she took, but for the haunting complexity of why she killed. Aileen wasn't the clean-cut, mask-wearing sociopath we saw in Paul Bernardo. She was raw, broken, unfiltered, A woman whose entire existence had been shaped by trauma. She was abandoned by her parents, raised in an abusive home, exploited from a young age, forced into survival on the fringes of society, trading sex for food, shelter, and safety. By the time she entered adulthood, the world had already taught her one brutal lesson: trust no one. Between 1989 and 1990, she shot and killed 7 men. Her claim? Self-defense. She said they were trying to harm her, that each killing was a desperate act to survive another assault. And yet, as investigators and forensic psychologists dug deeper, they found something more unsettling beneath the surface. A pattern emerged. A lack of remorse. A tendency to lie, manipulate, and justify. An emotional detachment that seemed to transcend even the most traumatic origin story. Psychological evaluations revealed strong markers of antisocial personality disorder, the very traits associated with sociopathy. But unlike the controlled, premeditated cruelty of killers like Bernardo, Aileen's motives weren't about dominance or power. They were reactive, fused with years of accumulated rage, betrayal, and degradation. Her violence didn't begin with a master plan. It erupted like a volcano, the result of decades of suppressed suffering and systemic failure. In Aileen Wuornos, we see something different. A sociopath perhaps shaped more than born, a product of circumstance, of trauma, of an environment so toxic, so consistently violent, that emotional numbness became a form of self-preservation. And that leads us to a much deeper and far more uncomfortable question. Is sociopathy written in our DNA, or carved into us by the world around us? Is it inherited like eye color, passed down in silence? Or is it made, forged in the fires of abandonment, abuse, and relentless pain? The answer may not be simple. But in stories like Wuornos's, we're forced to look beyond the crime and into the making of the criminal. So what's the truth? Well, it's both. Nature and nurture. Biology meets biography. Modern neuroscience has revealed striking patterns in the brains of sociopaths. Studies using brain imaging technology have found abnormalities, particularly in the amygdala, the region responsible for fear, empathy, and emotional regulation. In many diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, the amygdala is underactive. That means reduced empathy, blunted fear responses, an inability to process guilt or remorse the way most of us do. There's also growing evidence of genetic predispositions, hereditary markers that may increase the likelihood of developing sociopathic traits. In short, some people are born with emotional brakes that barely work, if at all. But biology doesn't act alone, because the other half of the equation is the world they're born into. Trauma, neglect, abuse, abandonment. These aren't just sad stories from the past. They are psychological templates, shaping how the brain wires itself for survival. Many sociopaths share eerily similar childhoods. They were beaten or belittled, raised in homes without consistent caregivers, exposed to violence not as an exception, but as a norm. These formative years aren't just memories. They're maps guiding how the mind learns to trust, to relate, to feel. And for some, those maps lead down a path of detachment, defensiveness, and destruction. So when you take a predisposed brain, one already wired to struggle with empathy, and place it in an environment of chaos, cruelty, or constant instability, you don't just get a damaged psyche. You get a weaponized identity, a personality built to manipulate, to dominate, to survive at any cost, even if that cost is human life. Because when connection feels dangerous, and control becomes the only path to safety, sociopathy can evolve from a trait into a tool for power. And that is when it becomes lethal. So, the question that keeps survivors awake at night. The question that haunts psychologists, teachers, even friends and family who look back and wonder, how can we tell? What are the warning signs? What do sociopaths show us before it's too late? The truth. The signs are there, but they're subtle, often buried beneath layers of charm, intelligence, and practiced behavior. Let's break it down. White heavy checkmark chronic lying, not just the occasional white lie, but habitual deceit used to manipulate, control, or create an illusion. Lies become tools. Reality, optional. Superficial charm, they know how to turn it on. Think of it as emotional camouflage, flattery, eye contact, rehearsed warmth. It's all part of the act. Lack of empathy in relationships, they don't form emotional bonds the way others do. They mimic affection, but they don't feel it. They may hurt others emotionally, financially, even physically, and never flinch. Impulsivity and thrill-seeking, boundaries mean nothing. Whether it's reckless driving, gambling, risky sex, or criminal activity, they live for stimulation. The more dangerous, the better. Animal cruelty in childhood, a chilling and common red flag. Not every sociopath starts this way, but many show violent tendencies toward the vulnerable early on. Manipulation disguised as affection, they know what love looks like, what kindness sounds like, and they use those tools to get what they want. Love bombing, guilt tripping, gaslighting. It's all part of the performance. And now, here's the scariest part. They know what society expects. They know how to wear the right face, say the right thing, give the perfect handshake. They study us, then mirror us. Not because they care, but because mimicry gives them access. To jobs. To relationships. To you. Sociopaths don't fail society's tests. They pass them, sometimes better than anyone else. They don't set off alarms. They disable them. And by the time we realize what they are, they're already inside the house. Israel Keyes was a ghost. Not in the paranormal sense, but in the terrifying, real-world sense of someone who could drift through society, invisible, unnoticed, lethal. He left no clear pattern, no geographic focus, no victim type. He was the very thing investigators dread, a killer without a profile. A man whose crimes couldn't be tracked through psychology, behavior, or logic because he didn't operate within them. Instead, he built what he called kill kits. Metal buckets filled with tools of murder, duct tape, guns, rope, Drano, and buried them across the United States. Places he had no connection to, towns he hadn't yet visited, murders he hadn't yet planned. He'd wait years, returning to those kits like some twisted scavenger hunt, choosing his victims not based on rage or impulse, but opportunity. Because he could. That was the motive. Not hatred. Not revenge. Just the thrill of absolute control. He didn't see people as human beings. He saw them as pieces in a game only he knew how to play. In every forensic profile, Israel Keyes checked the boxes. White heavy checkmark cold emotional detachment. White heavy checkmark strategic, premeditated violence. White heavy checkmark zero empathy. White heavy checkmark total absence of guilt. Even the FBI, hardened by decades of profiling serial killers, admitted Keyes was one of the most methodical and terrifying criminals they had ever investigated. And here's the part that chills you to the bone. He had a daughter. He packed school lunches, ran a small construction company, joked with clients, smiled in family photos, the kind you frame and forget. He blended in so well that when he vanished off the map, no one noticed. Not until it was too late. By the time authorities began connecting the dots, he had already killed and disposed of at least 11 known victims. And that's just what we know. There may be more. There almost certainly are more. And so we're left with the most haunting question of all. How many more Israel Keyes are out there, living among us, blending in, waiting? Not driven by fury, but by the void. Because sociopaths don't wear warning signs, they wear masks. And the truly dangerous ones never take them off. These stories we've explored today of Paul Bernardo, Aileen Wuornos, Israel Keyes. They're not just tales of killers. They're windows into deeper, darker questions that challenge everything we think we know about crime, justice, and human nature. Can we predict sociopathy before it turns deadly? Is it possible to spot those early warning signs, the patterns, the behaviors, and intervene before tragedy strikes? Or are we chasing shadows, trying to catch a ghost that slips through our fingers? Should we be screening children for red flags? Can early diagnosis save lives, or does it risk labeling and stigmatizing vulnerable kids, many of whom might grow up to live normal, fulfilling lives? How do we find that delicate balance between protection and compassion? And perhaps the most difficult question of all: how do we balance justice with empathy? When someone's been shaped by trauma, neglect, or brain chemistry beyond their control, how do we hold them accountable without losing sight of their humanity? These are questions without easy answers. But they're urgent. Because behind every headline, behind every profile, there are real lives, victims, survivors, families forever changed. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think? Can sociopathy be predicted? Is early intervention the answer, or the risk? How should justice systems adapt to these complex realities? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's build a community that doesn't just consume crime stories, but thinks critically, learns deeply, and respects the weight of these tragedies. And if you're passionate about peeling back the layers of the criminal mind, if you want to understand not just what happened, but why, then hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Because here at The Crime Keeper, we're just getting started. There's a lot more to uncover. More minds to explore. More stories to tell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Sociopaths aren't the monstrous shadows lurking in dark alleyways, waiting to pounce. They aren't creatures of myth or horror stories. No, more often than we realize, they walk among us. They could be your teacher, your colleague, your partner, or even a stranger you pass on the street every day. That's the unsettling truth. The real danger is how seamlessly they blend in, how convincingly they play the part of normal. But understanding sociopathy isn't about giving in to fear. It's not about paranoia or suspicion. It's about awareness. About arming ourselves with knowledge, not to judge, but to protect. Not to alienate, but to educate. And most importantly, never to forget the victims, those whose lives were stolen far too soon by hands that knew no remorse. Because behind every story of a sociopath, there is a real person who suffered. A voice that was silenced. A life forever changed or lost. Here on The Crime Keeper, our mission is to bring those voices back. To honor the victims, to learn from the past, and to shine light into the darkest corners of the human mind. So until next time, remember, stay curious, stay critical, and above all else, stay human. Because it's our humanity that keeps the darkness at bay.